What's up, strength coaches? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are again making strength and conditioning not boring. And today we are diving down the rabbit hole of nutrition even more. And we have a nutrition kind of expert on the topic of, you've worked with professional fighters, so I'm going to stop talking and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Nicole Alai. I recently left the UFC where I was one of the combat sports dietitians working with the rostered UFC fighters. There was around 600 rostered fighters, and yeah, our job was to help them during their fight camp, help them during their fight week, and both were a little bit different. And then of course help them transition and then get back into another fight camp. So there were a lot of nuanced, nutrition to working at the UFC. And so that's kind of where I am right now in the sense of like working in the private practice, working with different combat sports athletes, like at least at the UFC was like a lot of MMA. And now I actually dabble back with boxing and some wrestling, some taekwondo. Like it's like going back, I'm going backwards to when I was at the Olympic Training Center. So it's been great.
I mean, the fact that you're diving into those difficult sports, and I only understand it at a very, very small level from my friend and taking professional fights and being around a MMA gym for 2.5 years. But like the things that they do leading up into a camp, and then even the cut, like for our listeners out there that maybe work in those sports or they work in wrestling, like what is your biggest piece of advice of things? Because that's just a big rabbit hole.
Yeah, so I guess advice to the dietitians I can give and the advice to the athletes is I guess more to the athletes, it's making sure that you find a good like group of coaches and staff members that you enjoy like working with, or pad holders or different like jujitsu or MMA coaches. Like find a good group that all talk to each other, but also that want to see you be an MMA fighter for a long period of time, so that want to see the longevity of your career and get you moving slowly and steadily, and start early with getting your performance set in the sense of like getting your nutrition set, getting your strength and conditioning set, get your recovery modalities and your physio, all of that in a good place. Like get good habits around there when you start, so that you can keep those going, and again, keep the longevity of your career, really protect yourself in that sense. When it comes to dietitians, it is a different beast to work with combat sports athletes. I would say, get your dabble more in those regular team sports, where it's not so much team sports, and like some individual sports, like where it's not so much a heavy emphasis on like meal planning and losing weight and optimizing body composition, and where it's like set schedules, set competition dates. With fighters, it's not. You never know when they're gonna just up and take a short notice fight. Like Alex Volkanovski is a great example of that. And so you really never know. So that's why you want to make sure that you're able to like really be flexible and understand their body fairly well, so that if you can really, get the intricacies of working with like a runner or with a soccer player, great. Now you can move and take all that knowledge that you have into more of like the nuanced nutrition when it comes to working with a combat sports athlete, and like really periodizing their meal plan based off their training schedule, and then transitioning into a fight week where they're already heat acclimated, and now you're just going to do some like low residue diet and then some water loading and weight cutting. So it's very nuanced, and you can go straight into it, and that's fine. You just got to make sure that you really do get some hours put in so that you can practice that.
You said some things about water loading in there for anybody that's listening and they're like, okay, my athletes are doing it wrong. Like, what is the best practical advice that you give them on the water loading and the cutting? Because I've heard some things, and like, I don't know if what I've heard is right either.
Yeah, I would say I don't know the water loading process as it relates to like powerlifting. Like, I can't speak to
Mm.
that. It might be very similar. It might be different. I just am not so well versed in that sporting population. But if you're looking for a good standard starting point, I'm going to give you a reference. I would use the UFC PI journal
Okay.
and read through that. Or, there are definitely a lot of podcasts by, Charles Stoll and like Clint that have been interviewed. that talk more about the water loading process. But once you get that information and know that there's a difference between water loading versus water tapering, then you got to practice it. I know it's crazy, practicing the water loading process in the middle of your fight camp or at the beginning of your fight camp sounds weird to do, but that is something that we made sure fighters, practiced while they were in camp, just to get the nerves out and to know, okay, I've
Yeah.
done it before. So I know I'm going to water load for these days and everything else is going to stay the same. And I'm going to do a little mini cut on this day just so I can see how much, how much sweat I get out, how much weight do I lose. It's not going to be detrimental to your performance because again, it's controlled. You have your team involved. Everything else is still staying the same. You're going to maybe modify the training schedule just a little bit so that you're not doing too, heavy loads, I guess, with the water loading and the cut and like, an MMA or sparring session together. So having that team, that core team together so that you can practice that, so that you don't feel scared come fight week is key.
No, 100%. And the meal planning things, how do you go about like with that? Like, do you like what's the best thing that you'd recommend then? Is it, 6 meals? Is it broken up? Like, how do you best recommend it? And if you're going to be like, hey man, it's just based off the athlete, like I get that too.
Yeah. So, okay. So if I get certain athletes and fighters, I have a wide age range. I have, I would say young adults who are in like junior boxing, Olympic training and stuff like that, where it's like meeting them where they're at with their school and like what they like to eat. And then I also have older adults who teach jujitsu, but also train jujitsu and so don't have a lot of time. And so you kind of want to meet them with what they have available. But yes, I try to advocate for 3 meals and 3 snacks. I mean, that's kind of like my baseline. But again, if people don't eat like that from the get-go, I cannot force them to just go straight to that because the body will be like, hey, what the heck? I'm not ready for this. So I say, all right, let's start small. You're only eating 3 meals a day. Let's add 1 snack. Let's do that for 2 weeks, see how you feel. And then I want to add another snack. Sometimes it's let's do that for 1 month and see how you feel. And then I add another snack the next month. And then that just transitions into the third month. It can take a very long time to introduce new snacks and more calories and distribute all the meals and snacks throughout the day. It can take a while. It's just part of building a habit. And sometimes they're not used to it because of training schedule, work, stress, stomach issues. Like there's so many things.
Taking a quick break from the show to tell you about our deal we have going on right now in December. If you sign up for Fundamentals Level 1, you will get 1 free year at Strength Coach Network. That's right. Sign up for Fundamentals, our 20-hour long-form education course that has information on every topic in strength and conditioning that will make you a better strength coach, regardless of the field that you're in. Not only if you're a strength coach, personal trainer, athletic trainer, physio, this is for you because all the education about progressions, regressions, motor learning, speed, agility, jumps, you name it, we have information in it. So sign up for Fundamentals, get a free year at Strength Coach Network. Click the link down below. Let's get back to the show. Dive down that stomach issue part because I've had that come across with me and the athletes that I've worked with and trying to navigate that with maybe they didn't want to eat early in the morning or late.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you handle that and what are some things that you've seen?
Yeah, so fighters that I work with that have like an early morning training session, I do have to meet them where they're at. So if they're like, I don't eat anything in the morning, I say, okay, would you be open to trying something? Okay, yes, I am. Okay, well, what do you want? What would you be open to trying? Keep in mind, if you're going to be training at this intensity, these are the 2 macros. So like if you're training at maybe a moderate intensity, we want to distribute carbs and fat. Again, I'm trying to give him the energy first. That's the first thing that goes through my head. I want to give you energy. If you're going to go into early morning session and it's strength and conditioning, I'd be like, maybe we should have some protein. Maybe we should have some carbs. Like I try to be like, oh, you're going on a run? It's going to be low intensity. Okay, let's try to push maybe some carbs and fat. Are you open to that? Like, have you tried that before? I've never tried. I'm like, let's be safe and try carbs because that's going to be the one that sits best. And do you want a certain food that sits well with the stomach? Yes. Okay, let's try like a banana or maybe a little bit of oatmeal. Like, let's just try that. Something small, something easy for you to just pick up and eat within 30 minutes of training. And it may not even be enough for the entire session, but you're just like, we're starting somewhere, right? We're starting here. Okay, maybe next time it'll be 2 bananas, 60 grams of carbohydrates. Hey, that's not bad at all. Maybe after 2 bananas, we'll be like, let's add a tablespoon of peanut butter, a little bit of fat. You're doing this baby step process because I don't want to throw everything at them at once because they already have a lot going on. Just knowing a combat athlete and the different training sessions that they have throughout the day, it's like they're focused on that. They're focused on their performance. I'm like, let me just introduce one thing to you, and I will be the one to follow up to be like, how was it? How'd you feel? Like, so you don't have to think of the questions to, ask me, I'm already prompting you to be like, listen to your body. What are your energy? What's your recovery? How is your soreness? Were you able to push longer or harder for longer? Like that's how I prompt them. So baby step it is what I do.
Do you have anybody that will push back and be like, I'm no carb, but they will have fruit? Or like, do you consider, do you call starches your breads and your pastas, or do you call those carbs too? Like, how do you classify it, and how do you recommend people when they talk with athletes that are having the reluctancy?
Yeah, so sometimes I do throw the word carbohydrates around. Sometimes I do throw the word starches and grains around. I do try to categorize them, especially when I deliver that education in a handout that I send to them. I'll have like starches and grains, fruits, vegetables, dairy, fats, proteins, or you know, animal based, non-animal based. I try to categorize that. I I am not even, yes, I'll say like have some fruits, have some, some grains, some starches. I try not to stigmatize enjoying some candy or cookies here and there. I don't really have, even like I tell them, and like take some Vitargo with your electrolytes before training or during training. It's just pure like sugar, it's pure sugar, but it's going to digest fairly easily and it'll be used as energy immediately because your body needs it. And also, a lot of these fighters that I work with, like they're all on a calorie deficit, on a weight descent. So where I can like push carbohydrates to optimize that training session, I try my best. I wouldn't say I get a lot of pushback with like sugars and carbohydrate. I'm like, enjoy it, but listen to your body. I'm trying to like incorporate that mindfulness concept. Although I wouldn't say I'm like a subject matter expert in that area. I'm more of like, listen to yourself. Like, and I find that a lot of these fighters that I've worked with from start to finish, it's like, oh my God, I never knew I had to listen to these certain things in my body. It's like, yeah, how the heck would you know unless you kept track of that? So I always try to make sure, hey, what's my soreness? What's my energy? What's my recovery? What's my sleep? What's my stress? What's my mood? Like I'm keeping track of these subjective measurements so that they can see like nutrition is not it's not like physio or like sometimes like S&C where you feel like an immediate response. Nutrition
Yes.
is so
Patrick,
long.
yes,
It's so
yes.
long to find that information, to learn that, to like really see the results of like optimizing your nutrition. So, but yeah, going back to the carbohydrates, I don't get a lot of stigma. I'm really trying to tell them like, enjoy the cookie, like stop restricting yourself. Because right when you restrict yourself, you're going to binge later. And we don't want that.
Mm.
We want you to eat these things and know that it's okay to eat these things. But again, how do you feel when you eat this thing? Do you feel like shit or do you feel good? That's what I'm trying to teach them more of.
To your point about that, that's got to be super frustrating with, and I'm speaking from my former assistant was like, man, nutrition is so important, but it's not mandatory, right? Like that's got to be the most difficult part for you is the fact that you're never with them all the time. Like maybe if they were eating a meal, but like they're off doing it on their own, and you've really just got to work on educating them. And then there's just so much things fed at them with fads and
Yeah.
just bantered at them. How do you
Yeah.
handle that, and what do you recommend to our coaches?
Yeah. So when I'm not with them, I get going back to like how you're feeling. So I'm not with you, but you're going to go out and eat at this one restaurant and you're like, okay, and they like tell me these things. I like try to keep in the back of my head what I'm supposed to eat when I go to this restaurant. And I guess I should preface to the audience that with combat sports athletes, they're bought in. They're bought in because their money depends on them making weight. So like they listen. So I guess it's not fair in that regard when it comes to like NFL and NBA and soccer, like they are bought in with combat sports because they need to make weight. And so they'll listen to you. But when they go out to eat or when they're with a family, like I have some athletes that are like, oh, I'm at like a family get together. Like, what do I eat? I'm like, send me a picture. I'll tell you what to eat. I know it's not a good thing. I need to set more boundaries, but I'm also like,
Yeah.
or just use this method. Use the performance plate method. What did you do today? Did you not train? Okay, then we're going to have to use the easy performance plate method, which is half your plate veggies, a quarter of your plate protein, a quarter of your plate starches, grains, fruits, a cookie, whatever. Just use that visual. And then when I can like instill that information into them, they know that they can go out and eat that type of food. I mean, there's going to be a day where they binge. I'm going to be like, that's okay. don't beat yourself up. It's going to be okay. Maybe your body needed it. Maybe it told you, like, I want this food. It's because you've been restricting. This could have been like a good diet break for you. Let's see, it's not going to really make or break. It shouldn't really make or break the next day's weight, because unless you ate a ridiculous amount of food, it's okay. It's going to be okay. So when they're out and they want to go have like the food that they want, you want to feel like they can tell you. I think that's the part. You want them to feel like they can tell you and not feel ashamed and not feel like they have to binge. Like, that's the part that hurts. It's like, I want you to enjoy those food. I want you to go out and, like, have that, that dinner or whatever that's maybe higher in fat and carbs. Fine, just tell me so that we can work around it the next day. So that's like one big thing. You can't control everything, but you want them to trust you and believe that you'll take them on this journey, and maybe educate them afterwards. Like, hey, how did you feel though? Did you feel good for training? Did you go to sleep well? Like, did you wake up? Those are things
No, but it
to
tasted fantastic,
to
right?
consider. Yeah, but you want them to like listen to themselves, to their body, and know, like, okay, this is how I felt when I ate this food. Maybe I'll eat it on this day when I'm done with training, so that I
Yeah.
can fuel on this day. So they think that way. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's, I would say maybe that's how you gotta like be able to give that education to the athlete. Like, listen to your body. Like, go ahead, have that food. Because I'm not also, like, again, going back to have a cookie, have some candy. Like, don't binge. Like, be able to enjoy those foods. Don't restrict, so you don't binge in the future. Like, I'm not a very like hard dietitian that's like, don't eat this, don't eat that. I'm like, I'm going to meet you where you're at, but I'm also going to teach you how to listen to your body and know, hey, this is how I felt. I didn't feel recovered. I felt exhausted. I felt like I couldn't push hard enough. Then let's try something different. Let's try something different. Yeah.
You talked about how, athletes that have to make their money to make weight. How about when you were at UCLA with like diving and gymnastics? Because we have a good notion of team sport athletes that, body weight within, whether it is wrestling, diving, gymnastics, figure skating. Like, how about with them? What's up, strength coaches? Taking a quick break away from the show to let you know about our membership site. Not only do we at Strength Coach Network put out the Cheeky Midweeky, but we have a membership site where you gain access to a video library and a members only forum. Inside the video library, you will have access to over 170 different lectures, which equals over 400 hours of content. Inside of these content, it is every sport you could think of and every topic in strength and conditioning. In our members only forum, we have career advice and we have topics in strength and conditioning where coaches ask each other questions and we help each other inside the network. You can try the network out for 24 hours for $1 if you are not a member. Click the link down below and you will be able to check us out.
Yeah, so it's interesting. When I was at the Olympic Training Center as well, I worked with diving and gymnastics, and I wasn't so heavily involved with them, I have to say, but there is some intricacies that it comes with working with that population as it relates to like muscle glycogen and holding of water and feeling taut in their muscles and not being able to flip and maneuver the way that they want to. But it also comes back to like, because they're very much, there's a lot of influence in how they win their competitions or how they're judged based off physique and
Yeah.
body. So I did work with more of the junior level artistic gymnasts, and there was a heavy emphasis for me on 3 meals a day, snacks throughout the day, fuel your training. That was what my emphasis was with those girls, and it was just like building a habit. You're like kind of getting into like more of the Olympic team. Like, let's build these habits now. Let's fuel for this training session. Let's get enough calories because you guys train so much, and then give me your feedback. How was it? I felt good, or I didn't feel like this. And so I think a lot of at the Olympic Training Center, it was like educating. At UCLA, it was like they were going to school and also trying to be the best athletes in the collegiate setting. And so it was more of educating and being there to answer questions, being available, knowing that they can trust us and give us any kind of feedback, and like just having snacks and fuel available to them. It was just gaining that rapport, I think, because sometimes with that kind of population where it is emphasis on physique and body composition, it's more like, we're not here to tell you not to eat. We're here to tell you to eat on your level and how you want to do it. Like, I'm here for you, like that was what the emphasis was.
No,
Yeah.
that's super cool. And I think that, is there any validity to this thought that I had where, for me, when I was working with any athletes that I felt were trying to restrict food, I would almost make it a point where I would eat snacks on the floor if it was like a one off individual training session with them, or maybe at the end of the training session, like they'd see me drink a shake or eat a meal with them, just so that way they're not like destigmatized of like food is bad.
Yeah, it's like mimicking. You're the stimulus and then they can mimic what you're doing. It's good so that they're surrounded by people that know the value of nutrition and the value of consuming fuel like on consistent schedule. Even though you may not have been training, you're like, yeah, but I should be eating my meal at this time because I know the value of maintaining, optimal blood sugar levels and like maintaining muscle mass. And I know that I want to feel good. And I know that when I eat these times throughout the day with these types of macros, whatever, you may not talk to those points, but like when I eat, consistently, I feel good. And so mimicking when one of the staff members is doing it, especially when all the staff members are doing it, like you have the entire staff of like physio, conditioning, and dietitians all lifting in the gym at the same time, that'd be sick. Like, or like everyone like doing it like a teaching kitchen together. You got strength and conditioning, you got physio, you got the therapist, the doctor, you got everyone like making food together with the athletes. Like it says something, like it says a lot, they feel like it's a team.
Yeah, when you just said that about making food, it made me think about how I've heard athletes say it, and you've probably heard it too. How do you answer it when athletes are like, "Oh, it's too expensive to cook at home or to eat healthy"?
Yeah, that one's tough. You,
Because it's
I,
not true.
it's
Like,
not true. There's definitely a way to do it. It's a habit. It's building that habit out and finding why it's important to them to do it. What meals are easy for them to make at home, like that's what's key is what is the barrier? What's stopping them? What do they do at that moment in which they should be making the food? Like, do they sit down to watch TV? Okay, how do we do it so that when they come home, they don't sit down to watch TV, but they got the TV on and they got like everything set up already. Like they already have like maybe the cutting board out. Maybe they got this out or whatever. They got, the tools that they need to prepare something easily, smoothly. Oh, I go to get water. Okay, well, you go to get water. You might as well get this out and do this. Like insert it into their daily schedule and find the foods that taste good to them. And if that means you got to start off by letting them enjoy the foods that may not be a dietitian's dream meal for them, then let them start there. Let them start there, You don't want to like cut them off from what makes them feel comfortable. You want to introduce new things over time, like add this, try this, maybe do this, like because they don't know you. They don't have to do it if they don't want to. But they want to
ooh,
feel like you care. They want to feel
ooh.
like you want to help them be better, not just as an athlete, but as a person, you know?
How do you go about building that relationship? Because I've seen some great and I've seen some poor, and it might be just a short time, it might be a long amount of time. But the best relationships I've seen that nutritionists have with the athletes are the ones that are around them the most. Like advice to coaches on how they can get their nutritionist around more for that better relationship between athlete and nutritionist or RD. And then afterwards, let's talk about the difference because I don't know
Yeah.
the difference.
Okay. Yeah, I think you just got to be there, go to practice, go to, strength and conditioning sessions, be there at the physio table. I know we all say that, but it's like, it's true. Be there, be there. If you're not there, they're not going to see you. They don't think you care. So if you have other things going on, like you're going to have to prioritize going to soccer practice, going to field hockey, whatever practice, like be there, offer up snacks, like talk to everyone. You might be the one that might need to initiate the conversation, like, and show face. Like we would at the Olympic Training Center, like we'd go to gymnastics practice. Like we're always there. Go to wrestling, go to boxing, because that's where you're gonna have the conversations, the real conversations that pop up.
Yeah,
Like
they're
they'll
probably going to have
ask
their
you right
guard down
there.
because they're like in the
Yeah.
middle of training. They're like, actually, you're going to get a real talk.
Yeah, yeah. For me, like when I was at the LA Galaxy, like I was just an intern there, and come around with like the water. I'd be like, "How you feeling?" Like just like a one-off conversation, like right then and there, very quick, nothing too long, but it's like, "How you feeling? You look like you may look a little tired. Let's try this drink today." Oh yeah, okay, I'll try it. Like I'm gonna come back and ask you how it went later. Okay, I'm like okay. So it's not about. It's like you also feeling confident in your ability to have a conversation with
Mm.
somebody that is trying to and not feel awkward and or so professional, like let your guards down, but keep that line. Don't lose that line. You have to keep that line. So don't feel like you can really shoot the shit with them, like and cross that line. Don't do that, because you want to make sure that you still are looked at as a professional, but that can also come down to their level and know what it's like to be an athlete, And so, but yeah, show your face.
What is the difference between RD and nutritionist? Because some of our listeners might have both or one or the other, and they're like, what does that mean?
In the States, um, and from state to state, it's a little bit different. But for the most part, in the
Really?
United, yeah, well, in the sense of like having a licensure and
Okay.
not having, and just being a registered dietitian, which is like being a registered nurse. You still take a
Okay.
state exam and you're just registered. But like in certain states, like Nevada, they allow me to apply for a licensure that says I'm a licensed dietitian. I'm allowed to do these things, and no.
Quick break from the show to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button so that way you get notifications of when more content like this gets released. So, click that like and subscribe button. And with that, let's get back to the show.
A nutritionist or someone that's not a dietitian cannot do these things. You are not legally allowed, or else you'll be sued. In the state of California, we don't have licensure, and so you're just a registered dietitian, and you are the only people that can work in the hospital and be able to provide tube feeding and like total parenteral nutrition. They will never bring in a nutritionist. You will never see a nutritionist. God forbid you'll ever see a nutritionist. They will never hire that in the hospital because they weren't schooled in how to provide like medical nutrition therapy, which is like the big divider between nutritionists and dietitians. Medical nutrition therapy is only a dietitian is skilled in that area. Where we go to school, we do 1,200 hours of supervised practice in different realms of nutrition, and one of that is called medical nutrition therapy under the umbrella of clinical nutrition. That really is, like, I would say, the big signifier of what defines us, and as well as the education and the hours of internship experience. But yeah, we're the only ones that can go into the hospital and provide that kind of advice, meal recommendations, and specifically around the tube feeding and like vein feeding. That's the only that would say that. But yeah, so taking a state exam, 1,200 hours of supervised practice, getting a bachelor's now, getting a master's in dietetics or nutrition. Is what separates us from nutritionists who don't have any of that. But in, across the globe in other countries, it's different. It's different. I can't speak to those, but there is education around it. There are some overarching organizations that provide a lot of very good education to people who may not have gotten to school, may have not gotten to school around that. And so it's a bit more complicated across the globe, but in the United States, that's kind of how we separate it. Yeah.
With respect to privacy for all of the things that you've seen over those 1,200 hours, what were some of the things that you saw during that time that helped prepare you to work with athletes compared to other Gen Pop? Like, just talk about that. That's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I think I would imagine a lot of dietitians would say, like, working in the clinical setting really teaches you a lot about the different diseases and conditions people go
I
through their
bet, yeah.
lifespan. And knowing the value of being able to read labs in the hospital setting, and knowing the value of being able to communicate with other practitioners, doctors, respiratory therapists, speech language pathologists, and being able to have that rapport, and also seeing the hierarchy of how things are done, and knowing that there are other influences as it relates to like the culture and the environment of that community, and also just life, and just kind of seeing that progression. But yeah, I would say like the communication, the collaboration, and just seeing some scary conditions, and how nutrition can help, and how sometimes the system is a little failed, and also yeah, just severity of different diseases and conditions that when you go into like a sports setting, especially in combat sports, we see a lot of like acute dehydration. We see a lot of chronic stress, but with the acute dehydration, you see potential AKIs, which is something that you come across in the clinical setting, acute kidney injuries. Sweating more than 2%. I don't know what the cutoff is for when you experience like an AKI, but like, having like an acute kidney injury is something that I wouldn't be surprised a lot of fighters experience during that weight cut period, 24 hours before a weigh-in, and knowing how to rehydrate properly, and knowing what that fighter needs to rehydrate optimally in order to in order for them to feel like they've come back to life, I guess, for lack of a better term, and knowing what not to provide them that could potentially be very detrimental to their health. Knowing the difference, it's scary that some people are out there giving out recommendations on like certain rehydration that you're like, no, do not drink
That's
that.
that's
It's,
exactly what I'm saying. Like there's you
yeah,
see these like IV places just like right across the strip, and it's like, oh yeah, come get this IV, or like these
yeah,
just random people like, oh, slim down with me training, when it's like
yeah,
you've gotten real like it's
yeah.
terrifying, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I have a lot of experience with the IV realm, although I do know that a lot of fighters go and get that, but UFC roster fighters can't because it's against like USADA. You can't have a certain amount of like IV fluid, but I'm not sure how it works with their new overarching organization. It's going to be probably more strict. But other promotions, I'm not sure, Bellator or PFL, how they do it, they do allow IV, and you have to be careful. Yeah, you really have to be careful. It's not like these IV spots know the intricacies of what a fighter goes through. Yeah, they sweat. Okay, they do an acute sweat loss. Great. Making sure that the person that's giving you the IV drip is a registered nurse or a doctor or a PA or nurse practitioner, and that they've done this before, and just know that this, like, their livelihood depends on it. Like, they are going to make money and they need to rehydrate properly. So I only know the oral route technically. But yeah, it's scary when somebody recommends the wrong oral rehydration solutions. Scary
That's
to
the way
see
that I
that.
was thinking about it. Like, oh, it's almost like somebody working at the mattress store saying that they're a sleep expert. It's like, of course you're a sleep expert. You're going to say that, but like, are you at like you haven't probably studied it as much as
Yeah,
anybody that is actually working in health and human performance.
right.
Um, yeah, because like it can't just be a supplementation advice from you, or like how do you handle that balance with supplements or food within this medical nutrition therapy world?
Um, Supplements and food. So, ye- yeah, it's a fine balance, and making sure that first of all they trust you enough to tell you all the supplements that they're taking. Sometimes
Right.
they don't tell you everything, and so you want to just ask them up front. Okay, these are all the supplements. They tell you these are the supplements I'm taking, and you say, all right, this is it. And what about like any kind of medication? You get that information, and you start to kind of piece that together with all the other assessment questions that you've asked them to see where is it? What do they need? What do they maybe not need right now? What they can really supplement come maybe fight week, stuff like that. So knowing just from working with fighters and knowing what is important for them supplement wise, and knowing that they're always sort of in a calorie deficit, it's like good information and experience to have so that you can delineate which ones are supplements that they should be taking, but also which ones should they just be pushing more food. And yeah, okay, every person is a little bit different with what foods they like maybe they don't like any fish. It's like, okay, but I know you need like omega 3s. You get hit in the head all the time, you need that. So okay, I'm going to push the supplement then heavily, so that we're just making sure that we protect your brain. But when it comes to sometimes situations where they're just like training a lot 3 times a day 6 days a week, I'm like, okay, I can give you some good, like, I would say, like, the research is still, I think, improving in this realm, but like curcumin to help with like inflammation around like muscle recovery and just overall recovery, I do like to recommend that. But I also like to put a heavy emphasis on, like, are you recovering? Like, are you taking those recovery sessions? Like, do you know what that means? It's important to optimize your recovery side by side with your freaking training, because you guys train so much that you need to recover just as much. Because I can't help you with your weight if you cannot recover. Like, I really can only do so much. And the same thing, like, if you don't train enough, and no amount of nutrition is going to fix the weight, like, and so it's a bit of a fine balance. So I kind of pick and choose what I should push for when it comes to supplements. But there are definitely some that are essential that I think everyone should know about. Like, everyone should be like pushing the strength and conditioning staff and the physio should still be emphasizing the need for omega 3s to protect the brain, creatine to protect the brain. That those are things that are everyone should be fostering in this like combat sports realm. But if you don't know anything about supplements, then go ask people who are well versed in those areas. And if you feel like those supplements haven't been
What's up, strength coaches? Want to take a quick break from the show to talk to you about our sponsor, Team Builder. Team Builder is your one-stop shop for online training platform needs as a coach. With Team Builder, you're going to be able to program for your athletes whether they're in person or remote. Using Team Builder, not only will you be able to program for your athletes, but there are special features such as the leaderboard and locking training with wellness questionnaires. With the leaderboard, you can have an exercise performed that day, whether it be a lift, a sprint, or a jump, and scores can be updated in real time and projected on a TV in the training. Wellness questionnaires can be used at the beginning of training, and your athletes will have to fill them out prior to being able to train. This ensures that as a coach, you're being able to collect quality data before the athletes train. So, if you're interested in Team Builder, click the link down below and find out more information. Let's get back to the show.
Tested with your sport or niche, then ask for help to implement that. Like, ask them how they would implement it into their program so that you can start to see if any of these supplements do help your population. And so I just like pick and choose, because sometimes you don't want to put too much supplements into a fighter because they're like, I don't want to eat all these supplements.
No, and I mean, not to mention the fact that anybody can overwhelm themselves with all the different choices that they have for something that's like, and then the writings about all of them, like, oh, you need this essentially to live if you want to live optimally, and then they can get kind of sucked down into that rabbit hole.
Yeah. So I'm like a big proponent of, third-party tested supplements, and I'm sure like people can talk more to maybe they want to talk more to the cleanliness of it as it relates to like how it was grown and manufactured, whatever. But I talk to more of like the impurities and things that could potentially get into the product. And also I talk more to like what's in the bottle on the label and on the label in the bottle, like with third-party tested products, NSF, informed choice, and then there's some international certifications. Those testing companies go in and test like batches to make sure that what's on the label is in the bottle, and that's one thing that I try to like put emphasis on when I talk to athletes and coaches and managers, just to make sure like, hey, make sure you're getting the right product, and also make sure that it's been tested so that there aren't any impurities in it, that you're not getting extra like stuff that could test positive out there. And then if people go down the rabbit hole of like, is this the best kind? It's like, okay, we can keep going to like, okay, which is the best magnesium? All right, well, what do you want it for? And like, then we'll go down that. And then I go into, okay, well, let's see what the research says. And, oh, there's no research. Okay. I'm like, okay, let me see if I can reach out to people and see what they know about this. I go down that rabbit hole to like, make sure that I'm not recommending the wrong supplement, and that it's been tested and there's research to support it, and you are fitting the bill for the need of that supplement. I try to make those steps and try to educate on those steps.
Speaking of research, there happens to be a lot of times for strength coaches where the population might not actually be the team that they're working with, simply because those athletes weren't available because of the process to get research done. How do you find the research that you like to use, and what do you do when things like that do come up and you reach out to your other colleagues, or do you try to find research that it was on a different population, maybe recreationally trained people? Like, what's your go-to?
Yes, so I try to obviously find the sport of interest, and then if I can't find my specialized sport, then I try to find a sport, because at least it's in the realm of activity. And if I can't find that sport, then I do move down into more gen pop, or the next could be into medical. I'm going down this realm, and I'm just keeping it in the back of my head, like it's a different population. Like if I had to pick one that had to do with more clinical setting, then I'm like, oh, totally different population. They're not active, but what is the takeaway? What did they find? And how might that be different from what I'm seeing and what I'm looking for to prove or disprove what I think might help? So yeah, you kind of have to go down that realm. And then if there is a subject matter like expert out there, ideally you'd want to be able to reach out to them and see like, hey, I've already done my homework. I don't want to waste your time. I've done my homework. I've looked at the research. This is what I found or not found. What do you think as it relates to this? I'm looking to see if there's any kind of relation between these two. And where do you think I can go next to find this information, or what should I do next to find this information? So yes, you want to kind of try to find the research in that area, or try to find somebody that is a subject matter expert working with that population or that supplement, to see if maybe they've implemented something and they've seen a trend or something, like, some kind of association between this supplement and athletes, or athletes, like specific athletes and that supplement, maybe they have anecdotal data. Okay, and that's not, we can't discount that. Let's see what they've done and see if maybe that can relate to our specific population of interest.
Speaking of your population of interest, what has been some of the best things about working with your combat athletes? Because like we said, it's not an easy population to work with. Like the fact,
No,
like all the sports that you've been choosing, like
I know.
God bless you for that. Like what has been, let's celebrate some of the highs.
I would say they appreciate every advice that you give them. They appreciate you. They know the value. I think we all, as dietitians, feel so undervalued on like many teams in different settings, like in the food service community, clinical, and in the sports setting. We sometimes feel a little bit undervalued because we don't give like instant gratification with our recommendations. And so with fighters, they know the value of working with a dietitian and optimizing their meals and their fuel to help them get their weight to a certain point. So it's sort of like a high when they are able to lose the weight and make the weight. You feel like, wow, I did that. Like, it feels good. You don't always feel that in other sports settings, you know, like you implemented that, like that meal plan, and they executed, and that was the result that you had, hypothesized at the very beginning, and they delivered. It feels so good. But it can feel very, very low when they don't hit it, but there are other extraneous variables that kind of go into play that you sometimes are like, okay, wow, I didn't, that's interesting. I'll have to take that into consideration when I start to work with other fighters in the future. But yeah, the high is having them sounds so bad, like lose the weight, having them, lose the weight, still optimize their performance, still feel like they
Yes.
have good energy, good recovery, soreness is going away. All of those other subjective metrics are improving while they're still being able to lose weight and get into the octagon and still be able to perform. And so that's the high for me.
How often is it that people need to add weight rather than lose weight in any of these?
Um, it is with some of the athletes that I've been working with. Um, I've had a few that are wanting to go up a weight class, which is a rarity to find. And the only reason why they're going up is because sometimes they're just, yeah, they're wanting to maybe not disrupt their teammate and they're wanting to go up. Or maybe they're just like, I just feel like I don't want to do the weight cutting anymore and I
Yeah,
want
the weight cutting has just
to.
been too much, and I'm done.
Yeah, sometimes that's the case where their coaches or managers suggest that they just go up a weight class. So yeah, that's very hard too. That people don't understand how difficult it is to gain weight. And so I feel like I've gotten a lot of expertise as it relates to weight descents and weight cutting. But sometimes when it comes to gaining weight, I'm always like, how are you feeling? Are you good? Like I'm always like double checking because I'm like, do you feel like full? Do you feel like you have good energy? Can you push hard for a long time, even though you're gaining weight? Like, do you feel like you still have good energy? So that's the flip side. And I would say it's a handful. It's not a lot of people that are like that.
For anybody that isn't familiar with it, when are weigh-ins, and then when is the typical, refueling, rehydration process look like? And again, without naming any names, what have been some of like the worst where you're like, oh my God, you did too much. Now you've binged ate. Now you can barely go train. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say um, for every combat sport, it's different. Like, for example, like nogi and gi, jujitsu, they'll weigh in and then a couple hours later they'll compete.
And
And
they have like
so,
tournament all day, right?
yeah, tournament all day, and that's similar to the international like wrestling scene as well. They'll weigh in the morning, and then they'll compete a few hours later, and they'll have multiple sessions. I think that's similar to collegiate. Do not quote me on that. I don't work with a lot of collegiate wrestlers, um, but it's boxing will have two like some local regional boxing will have like two weigh-ins. They'll have one in the morning and then a couple hours later they'll have another weigh-in. So you got to be very systematic about how you hydrate, but also you got to make sure, we need to lose the weight weeks prior to arriving to weigh-in so that we don't
Yes.
have to deal with that. And sometimes you'll have sports that will weigh in at the beginning of the competition and in the middle of the competition. So you have to keep that in mind as well. So that just comes back to like losing the weight, weeks prior to getting there so that you don't binge and rehydrate too much so that you're having to like cut weight in the morning and then compete in the evening. Um, But with many of the MMA fighters, it is like a morning, Friday morning, Saturday morning, Thursday morning weigh in, and then the next day in the evening, you have like 30 something hours they'll compete. And maybe I would say when I was at the UFC more so, because we didn't work with every UFC roster fighter. They had their own dietitian and their own strength coaches that would help them with rehydration, and sometimes they want to do it their own way. And or we'd give and or we'd work with those with certain fighters and they'd still do it their own way, you know. So I would say more in that when I was working over at the UFC, did I see some fighters like have the wrong food and or drink too quickly and just throw up. And that's the worst part. Like if you had a pretty tough cut the day before and then you weighed in, you started drinking your rehydration and you're just chugging, chugging, chugging. The thing is your stomach, up until that day, we had been kind of decreasing your calories. So your stomach is getting smaller and smaller and smaller for like 4 or 5 days leading up to it. So if you just down this water that you have not, your body had not recognized in the last few days, it wants to expel it. And so that individual will literally vomit up all of their rehydration. And then they'll start to cramp, just like I've seen like full body like cramping. And that's when we go into like medical nutrition therapy mode. And we're like, okay, this is what's happening to you. We're going to need to pretty much like get you some water and a lot of salt, like a lot of salt. And or they're like pretty like different avenues of how you can address the cramping. And usually obviously you want to get them rehydrated back, so you want to introduce like the regular rehydration formula, but sometimes that's not enough to get that cramping to stop fast enough. So you sometimes have to give them just like what I find, and don't quote me on it, but I find that it's the salt that they needed, with of course some fluid to put back in them, but it's like a substantial amount of salt that they need, that we give them like the right stuff, and the cramp starts to go away. And then you start to reintroduce the water back in, because you had just given them 1,700 milligrams of sodium. Now you want to put back the water, but in the right time frame, so that you're not causing them to throw up or cause any kind of GI issues. So we always tell them when they start to drink their rehydration, drink slowly. Drink this over 15 minutes, over 20 minutes. Do not rush. Hold back. You have to have the coach or the corner put a timer on to tell them stop. Like you need to take the drink away. Like you need to just wait. I'm sorry. Like you have to wait and just drink sips, sips, sips. And people will stick to that. And they notice that they feel significantly better when they stick to that schedule, obviously. And so we are always there to kind of remind them, don't drink too fast. Don't drink too fast. And those that do throw up, start to cramp, then we give them our intervention of sodium and some fluid again, and then they don't forget that in the future.
Do you do any sweat rate testing with any of your athletes? I did it at Towson with some of my team sport athletes, but are there things that you do individually that you consult with your athletes?
I do the regular tried and true. I wouldn't say sweat rate, yes, not like electrolytes, sodium testing so much. It's more like, hey, you guys need to be familiar with how much weight you lose from sweat during this training session and from this heat acclimation session and from this. Like, we need to be aware of this information because this dictates hydration during training and or how much you need to rehydrate for the remainder of the day before the next session. So I educate more to that. I don't necessarily push so much of like sweat patch testing. It's just one more thing that they have to do sometimes, and I barely get them to fill out a check-in form. So I meet them where they're at, and it's easy to get a dry weight before, keep track of your rehydration during, and a dry weight after, and it's easy for me to get that and for them to do that. Yes, would I love to know how much sodium they're losing? Sure, like that would be great. At this point, I have so many different things that I'm delivering to them, intervention modalities, meal plan, recovery, heat acclimation, that I try to get those down. And once those are down, if we can get into sweat testing or like me sending them like a Gatorade patch for them to try, like I'd love to do that. It's just sometimes the nuanced nutrition in that area. I just use our general range of 500 to 1,000 milligrams of sodium. Hey, do you sweat a lot? Oh, do you feel like you have salt? Yeah, okay, maybe you're around this area. Try it. See how it feels to consume 1,000 milligrams of sodium for 750 mLs, whatever. How did you feel during training? Say, oh, I felt great. I felt like crap. Okay, maybe we should decrease. That's how I do it. I don't, the sweat testing is more, I would say, I would assume it would be more controlled in the team sport organization, clinical setting than in private practice. Sometimes I
Yeah, I
can't.
mean, yes and no, because we would, put a patch on the athletes. They'd do a training session with me for 45 minutes, then it gets spun in the lab, and then we'd essentially be able to tell them in a matrix, hey, low sodium, low salt, low volume, low salt, high volume, high salt, high volume, high salt, low
Hmm.
volume, right? And
Hmm. Hmm.
but even at that, we'd give them a piece of paper like, hey, this is what it said. This is the number drink you need to have, and the number of them, and they still wouldn't follow it, right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
yeah, at that point, like kind of pour your energy and your time into those basics and those fundamentals, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I try to say you should be able to push harder for longer if you're getting enough salt because your body's retaining it, and so your heart doesn't have to pump as hard as it would if you were dehydrated. So be aware of that. Can you push harder for longer? Hey, try a training session where you're wearing a polar heart rate and you're having your current rehydration solution. Try that same training session with a polar heart rate and have a little bit more salt. Was there a difference? Did you notice a difference? Like, that's how I try to explain those overarching like theories of the importance of rehydration and like keeping track of like sodium intake. Um, and but in their mind, sometimes it gets stuck where a weight is the number on the scale
Yeah.
is what gets into their head. And I try to explain to them, hey, it's can be influenced by so many things. Remember, you do weight cuts, you lose this much water in how many hours? So how easily can we influence that number on the scale by manipulating so many things? So don't let it get to your head that we change some sodium intake influence you into thinking that number on the scale the next day just because it's maintained or is a little bit higher is actually your true number. Remember, we're trying to optimize these different systems. We're trying to, I like to say, manipulate these different physiological systems so that we can control for them later come weight cut day, where I can say, hey, we're going to drop all of this. Your body should just flush out all this water and flush out all this salt, and you should see this big jump in weight trending towards your weigh-in weight. So just think of it that way. We're trying to manipulate the body and see how we can optimize it, of course, so that you are consuming enough electrolytes and fluid, but also let's see how we can push it a little bit so that we can manipulate the flush. And I feel like I try to explain it that way, and I feel like it helps.
That makes a lot of sense. Walk us through a typical, what you do 10,000 foot view when somebody gets into a new camp and they need to go through a weight loss and they want to do it the right way. What does it look like and how do you work with them?
Yeah, so I try to get them at the start of their fight camp, and each person has a different duration for what a fight camp entails. It's usually 8 weeks. So if I get you at 8 weeks, I do a
Really?
full,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, I get a full
Not even
assess.
12. My goodness.
I know it would be great if it was 12. It's not even 8 sometimes. Like I get them at 6 or a month out, and I'm trying to stop that by telling them, hey, I'm not starving you at like 8 weeks out. I'm telling you to eat more at 8 weeks. But when you come to me 1 month out and I have to help you lose this much weight, I'm sorry, like I have to like induce some calorie deficit in order to help you lose the weight. But had you come to me earlier and had we manipulated the metabolism into knowing that you were eating more, but we were tapering it down, you know, it would have been better. But yeah, so a fight camp is usually 8 weeks. I do a full assessment on them, and usually the intervention is to help them lose weight. So I provide a meal plan that's based around their training schedule. I start with just a general meal plan across the board. I like to see, if they can just hit those numbers across the board. Yeah, I could do high and low days, but at the first week, as we're getting to know each other, I want to know if you can do this. And so
Geez,
I
those first few days must be so important over when you only have 8 weeks, right? Like it's every
Yeah,
day's
every day is
valuable.
important. Yeah, every day is important because honestly, I would say the average weight I have to help people lose is at least 1 pound a week. And I have to, like, we have to lose 1 pound a week, and that's never the case. Like, life does not
Yeah,
warrant
that's
that.
not.
Like,
Yeah, no,
it's
it's not.
never. So I give you a timeline. I give you like weight goals to hit every week. I touch base with you twice a week to make sure that we're trending in that direction, knowing in the back of my head we are not going to hit that goal every week. So I need to make sure that I'm staying on top of your meal plan, but you're staying on top of your recovery, because again, I can only put so many calories into you because of science and knowing that you have to be in a calorie deficit to lose weight. But you need to optimize your recovery, because I find that with most combat sports athletes, they train 2, 3 times a day, and it's always hard intensity training sessions. And so if they aren't optimizing the way that they, do like active stretching, yoga, like ice baths, foam rolling, like just getting all the gambit of like different ways to help you recover, that the weight will not come off, because
That's a really good point.
stress is stress, man. It don't discriminate. Like especially when I introduce heat acclimation, stress is stress. You got to put it on a day where it's low intensity, and we got to make sure we're doing the minimum amount to induce what we need, which is to improve your sweat rate. But we need to stop after, because I'm just putting another stressor on another stressor. So I'm trying to find ways to give them optimal recovery sessions while not stressing them about the food, but giving them the foods that they like, that are easy to access, that still induce a weight loss, and kind of take them through that fight camp. So I'm adjusting depending, and some dietitians would disagree, and I'm really trying to find better ways on how I can deliver this information. But sometimes I adjust every 2 weeks or every month, depending on how the weight is progressing. If they're losing weight every week, hitting their goal, great, keep the same plan. But if we're not losing weight, and I've asked those questions around soreness, recovery, energy, mood, and those all seem to be okay, then the next thing is I have to induce another calorie deficit, or your training needs to go up. But that's not my area of expertise. I'm always like, I assume based off the RPEs that you're giving me, this is high intensity and you're burning roughly around here. So then maybe it is the meal plan, or maybe I need to reduce it because you're over consuming. So I need to put a more severe deficit, because I know you're going to eat more, because no one ever logs properly. And so I'm progressing. I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting them enough calories. I'm checking on their subjective metrics. I'm checking their weights, progressing them in the right directions, that we are going to get into fight week 10% or 8 to 10% over, 6 to 8% for women, so that we can do some, low residue diet, some fat-free mass manipulation, water load, and then a water cut, weight cut 24 hours before. If it's like a weigh-in, again, it's making sure that we're very, very smart about how much we cut and how much we rehydrate back.
How much will it change based on if they're an experienced fighter or a non-experienced fighter? Does that go into what you do with them?
With experienced fighters, they do have a good foundation of knowledge around nutrition and their body and what foods they like. And they do, I would say, trying to think, there are some experienced fighters that are good with their weight, but there are still a handful that are not very good with maintaining a good walk around weight outside of their fight camp. And so I think it's really sometimes like just adding to their foundation of knowledge around nutrition and incorporating small little changes. This is where you can get it into more of the nuanced nutrition with them, because they can understand it, they know their body pretty well. And so you can add little tidbits, give them different supplement recommendations, or like slight tweaks to their meals or different recovery recommendations that would just give them that little extra 1% that hopefully they'll notice. But with like more of the amateur, it's like, just eat 3 meals and 3 snacks a day for the love of God, like, please, eat this much. And yeah, it's going to feel weird, but we got to do this. This is a good foundation to build, and yes, I will make sure we lose the weight every week. Don't worry. We'll get there. Trust the process is a lot of sometimes, hard for them to grasp. But as long as they're giving me honest information, they can trust the process.
Has there been a shorter than 8 week fight camp cut that you've had to do?
Um, yeah, I've definitely had fighters that come to me 1 month out to help them with losing like a couple pounds a week, and you're kind of like, sometimes I have to say no, because
Really?
you compromise my integrity now. You're asking me to be a magician. You're asking me to do things that I'm like, this is too much weight and I don't want to be involved with this. I'm not going to support this bad habit. You have to know when to put your foot down. You have to know when to say, this is not something I feel comfortable with helping you do. I don't want to starve you. I don't think you should be asking me to help you lose a couple pounds per week to get you to an optimal, 1 week out fight weight. And so you have to in the private practice setting. And when I was at the UFC, it's more like, no, you got to help them. And I get it. Yeah, it's a business. You got to help them. So I do what I can to help them lose the weight and be there to support them and provide them with all the recovery strategies I can. But now, because I'm in a private practice setting, I will say to them, like, come to me after your fight and I can help you. And I might give them some tidbits right then and there to like put them on the right path. But I just feel like you put you in a compromising position. And again, you propagate a bad culture. We don't want to support that.
Kudos to you for that, because not everybody would be doing that. They might just be like, all right, I'm going to find a way to help you do it. And I mean, myself included, I might be like, all right, let me prove that I can help you do the impossible.
Yeah, but it's like going back to like bad habits. Like, and I think it's because they think they have to starve themselves starting their fight camp. It's like, no, I'm telling you to eat more. If you come to me even earlier, I'm gonna make you eat so much more. Like, but I don't know why they don't think that. Like, I'm gonna restrict you. Like, no, have that donut, have that cookie. Like, go for it. I'm gonna be the one to tell you to have that, 16 weeks out because I want you to know that you shouldn't have to restrict. Like, eat more, eat more. I have a fighter that I've been working with for 2 years now, where I'm like, we've been able to lose like 15 or 20 pounds. And now he walks around at a great weight and he's able to go down to the weight class he had ideally wanted to be at, and eating so much carbohydrates, so much. And that he's my example to everyone, like you can be like him. It was rough at the beginning. He missed weight multiple times and had to be moved to another promotion. So like it can work if you put in the work and know and trust the process, that it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time, but every single time you do this like small fight camp, and we call it a fat camp. We don't, it's not a fight camp. We call it a fat camp because you're just like having to lose weight every time, but you're really messing up your metabolism because
Yeah.
then you rebound higher and rebound higher and rebound higher. And I'm like, I can help you. Like, we need to take a fight at a higher weight class so that you can eat and cut small amount right before you weigh in, and then keep taking fights at that weight class. And then as your metabolism starts to regulate, we can think about going down a weight class to where your, arm length, height, all correlates with that weight class, whatever.
What would you advise to a majority of our coaches, or excuse me, a majority of our listeners out there are strength coaches, but we do have nutritionists, athletic trainers, physios inside of the network. What is your number one piece of advice, maybe two or three, to strength coaches in how to properly work with the RD or the nutritionist that they have on staff?
Yeah, I would say I feel like you both need to, at the very beginning of the season, like sit down together to understand where both people are, focusing on. What are your goals? What are you hoping to get out of it? And likely you both have the same goals, but obviously from just different realms. You're both wanting to support like enough calories in and build muscle. Like you're probably both in that. You're saying the same thing. You're just talking different languages. So just having that sit down conversation, gain that rapport with them. It sounds so simple. Like it should be simple. Like hopefully you both are open to the idea of sitting down and talking to each other and learning from each other. Like I'll teach you a little bit about nutrition, you teach me a little bit about strength and conditioning. Like I'll come to the floor. I want to learn. Like I want to know. Obviously, like if you can integrate the exercise science of everything, my God, it would be a powerhouse, and being able to explain that, say on the floor with an athlete, you got the strength coach, you got the dietitian there. Dietitian is having like, starting the conversation around like, oh, did you eat before? And then the strength coach ends it with, we're trying to build muscle here, like you having that rapport and sitting down at the very beginning to kind of be like, this is my goal. This is my goal. Okay, you can, the dietitian talks to the strength coach and says, continue to push for them to fuel themselves before training, so that we can optimize their body mass. And the strength coach will tell the dietitian, like, continue to tell them to make sure that they attend and that they're putting all their energy into focusing on the strength and conditioning session and wanting to learn and get the most out of their training. Like, okay, I can do that easy, like kind of giving each other like a homework assignment to push to make sure that we're both saying the same thing, speaking different languages, but saying the same thing at the end of the day. But you guys both have to be open to it. I think that can be hard sometimes. Like, when I was at the UFC, like there would be the physio staff are always trying to make sure, like, are you eating, are you feeling, are you hydrating? It's like, great, I don't have to say it, like, this is wonderful, like, we're saying the same thing, like, and I don't have to be there, I'm not always going to be there, but we're saying the same thing. It was wonderful, you want that, so that everyone's on the same page, and we're all not having to work harder, we're working smarter, like, we have the same goal, we're not like working against each other. And so I think, like, just like keeping, checking in with each other. You getting everything you need? Am I doing what I can to get you everything you need? No, can you do this? Done. I can do this. I think those are simple. Like, get your ego out of it and just help each other.
What are some of the most common questions that your athletes or clients will ask you that you're like, okay, the basic person should know these things, like to educate?
Uh, I would say sometimes okay, I guess one, which is not very basic, maybe I'll answer that later then. It is around like carbohydrates and macros and weight loss. There are a lot of questions around that, and knowing that, carbs are used for energy, and knowing that caffeine is more for alertness, and that there's a difference. Like,
Oh, that's good.
energy gives you energy, caffeine gives you alertness. It's different. It's different. Like, having that distinguishing information, and it just comes down to words, and a lot of like protein is there to support obviously muscle maintenance, but it's there to help with recovery. You can't discount that. And so is carbohydrates. And you still need to consume fat. I think it comes back to the macronutrients, and knowing that these three macros have expansion of what they deliver. Sometimes one is more in how it provides like specific needs. So carbs provide a lot of energy. Can protein? Yes, they can be manipulated and converted into carbs and used for energy, but that's not their purpose. Let's use them for what their purpose is. And fat can be used as a source of energy. It is a source of energy. But when should we eat it? Oh, we should consume it more for your lower intensity, equally distribute it throughout the day, ideally. And just, I think for me, it's like helping them distinguish the roles of each of the macronutrients and what they should be used for at the very beginning is important. It's hard because they have so many roles and how they are used.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. What are some things that you're seeing in the world of athletics nutritionally that like we didn't talk about, but you're like, you know what, this is going on and this needs to be addressed?
In the world of athletics,
Combat sports, other sports where you're like, man, what is going, like, there just seems to be like, from your professional experience, what is some maybe misinformation or some things that you just see being done wrong that you want to be able to educate coaches on how to do it right?
yeah, I would say maybe the weight class thing. Like, that's like I would say a big topic of uh, like frustration amongst all of the dietitians and performance staff, where fighters want to go down a weight class, and we're like, for the love of God, don't go down a weight class. Like, why? And they're like, oh, because I feel like I would be bigger than them. It's like, well, no one ever said that you being bigger in the octagon equates to, more wins. So where are you going with this? And having to explain that it's a culture, it's breeding a bad culture that's coming from, like, sometimes, like, coaches who were previously fighters and would go down a weight class and feel like that was where they felt more successful. It
Yeah.
continues on down the line. And so we're trying to kind of like dispel that and say, hey, you don't need to go down a weight class. You just need to go up, eat more, and really focus on your performance. So, like, now it comes down to, like, are all your performance staff members delivering the right information, interventions to get you to be the best MMA athlete? I don't know. Now that comes down to, like, well, what's your performance? Do you have a performance staff? Like, you have an MMA coach, jiu-jitsu coach, wrestling coach, dietitian, strength coach. Do you have all those? No? Okay, maybe we should get that group. I mean, if you're trying to be one of the best MMA fighters in the world, you need to have that core group, and know that they're all trying to help you be one of the best fighters, and that they're all talking and that they're all on the same page. That doesn't, I'm going to be honest, that does not exist unless you're like, yeah, a rostered UFC fighter where all the staff members are helping you, where we're all talking. But it's culture. It's a big culture about weight cutting and wanting to go down a weight class and thinking that you'll get more wins that way. And maybe in certain types of fighting styles, it does equate to that, but it's hard to say if the research really supports it. So it's frustrating for us as dietitians because we go against our, like, ethical, like, bounds of helping you lose weight. Like, we don't want to do that. We want you to fuel yourself as optimally as you can so that you can perform the best you can in the octagon. And so uh, it's tough, that area, that culture, that weight cutting culture.
How do you handle the balance between, and you've alluded to it briefly in our conversation, but the duality of research and then practical implementation of people that are doing it? Like, how do you handle those two swords?
Yeah, so I mean, it's good if someone can put out. I think the UFC and a lot of like ISSN are trying to put out, research strategies that are more practical, that actually use fighters as the subject matter, and like give them practical interventions that really do apply for life. But there are a lot of research that don't apply it to the combat sports, that you kind of have to use and just troubleshoot and just try it, obviously not to an extreme where you feel like it's a detriment to their performance and their training, but um, you just kind of have to pull from the research what you can. I mean, a lot of, weight cutting came from a lot of water manipulation and water loading, and that process came from actually the clinical environment and how people would like bowel prep. A lot of the fiber manipulation that we recommend for our fighters, when we say low fiber, a lot of that came from the clinical setting, and it came from like a bowel prep process where you would consume a lot of water and excrete 1 to 2% of fiber from your body. Like, that doesn't exist. It's like an unethical process to sometimes have people do in a study, to have them put themselves through something like, water loading, which can cause hyponatremia. And so you kind of have to pull what you can that seems very similar to the concept in which you're trying to deliver and implement with your fighter. And so if we could get more research study around combat sports athletes, which I'm seeing a lot of, so it's making its way for sure, and it's practical, it's relatable, and it'll be nice to see and be able to implement. And so for now, we make do with what we can, and I'm hoping that there'll be a lot more studies around and there is studies around like REDS and hypogonadism and stuff like that, around like low energy availability and just hormone disruption. And it's very common in this combat sports realm. And so that's something that I'm finding is an area that I'm seeing a lot of. So I'm wanting more information and wanting more deliverables around that. And I'm hoping that they can put a lot more of that research out there.
That's awesome. I've had a pleasure being able to learn from you over the last hour plus. For anybody that's made it this far, where can they continue to follow you in your journey? We're going to link it all down below for them.
Yeah, so you can follow me. I'm predominantly on like Instagram, where I put out a lot of my education, and
Yep.
it's at Nicole Alai. It's ALAI Sports RD. So you can follow me there, message me there. I'm always answering. I'm always, I guess, in the DM, like answering anyone's questions. I enjoy it. I really do appreciate the questions that people ask. You can always email me at that same Nicole Alai Sports RD at Gmail, if you have any questions and or want to chat a little bit more. So yeah,
Awesome. I appreciate you, and have a great rest of your day.
thank you so much. Have a good one.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.